Welcome back to Beyond the Pump. Today, we are talking about a recently evolving yet age-old, crippling fear and anxiety that people have around having to be perfect, something we lovingly know as imposter phenomena, or what was formerly known as imposter syndrome, if that's a more familiar term. So, with all that to say, let's go ahead and jump on in. Fellas, have you ever felt insecure?
I have a question first.
Yeah.
Why did we have to change the name from imposter syndrome to imposter phenomena?
Well, I think generally speaking, there are a lot of things that go into syndromes, right? And if we just take back for a second medical etiology and like where disease nomenclature comes from, um, when we label conditions, it's really just our best attempt to organize and like say, hey, you have AIDS, autoimmune deficiency syndrome, right? Which now in someone that is educated in that field conjures up this a whole bunch of information that's attached to that singular word. The same thing when I say consistency, right? At drives a whole bunch of our previous life experiences and our own like understanding what that word is, which is why I think it's really important to define these things. Um, but effectively, they went from a syndrome, which is a condition that's typically considered probably something chronic or long-term, long affecting, to phenomena, which is the experience of those particular signs and symptoms in a more like transient, short-term experience of it, right? Like you're not always going to have imposter syndrome, which might influence and potentially be indicative of multiple areas of life versus just the one business that you're trying to start or that one relationship that you don't know how to navigate or whatever professional endeavor you have going on or personal. So good
So
question.
is this to appease the scientific world or the world that we live in where everybody is afraid of being labeled and a little bit on the soft side of things?
I mean, it's similar to when sexually transmitted diseases evolved into transmitted infections. So STDs is no longer the commonly acceptable medical term. It's now STIs or sexually transmitted infections, which are something that when we think about the stigma of a disease, like, obviously there's a lot of damaging things that could happen to that. So to answer your question, probably a little bit of the softness, but also the accuracy component.
Understood. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Not a lifelong
Well,
sentence, unfortunately. Or
I'm just
fortunately.
I'm
Fortunately.
just I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Those are
Um
great questions.
so, you asked the question about have you ever had imposter syndrome phenomena, whatever we'll call it, what do we want to call it, IP, IS,
I mean, I would just say feeling insecure.
feeling insecure. So
It's really about it.
um my answer is yeah, a lot of times, but also I feel like it always, I don't know, it always creeps in. There's always a moment of that like self-doubt, that wondering if you can, that whole like, man, am I going to be able to, there's always that question that I feel like pops into my mind when I'm doing something new, at the end of the day, something I've never done, something I can't stand in front of you and say, hey, I'm 100% proficient at this thing. That is almost always a question somewhere, somehow, that creeps in. And maybe it's dependent upon like, do other people know I'm doing this thing, or are they going to know, or is there going to be a thought in their minds around my ability to execute or do the thing or succeed or win or whatever? But the answer is yes, it has. And yes, it still very much does exist in my world on a, I'll say, frequent basis. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Brandon.
Yeah, I experience it on a daily. Every single day I wake up and I'm like, "Oh, I'm insecure." No, not not to that extent. But it is something, especially once you start becoming more proficient in whatever it may be. I think there's even like there's studies too that shows even when you do become more proficient in whatever it is skill, you I think that imposter syndrome increases with that. So it's interesting to see the more experience and knowledge you have in a field, the more that imposter syndrome creeps in. I really think a big part of this is due to social media also becoming a lot more prevalent in our lives. Because I don't remember anyone talking about imposter syndrome like 10 years ago. I feel like I've only heard about imposter syndrome maybe like 5 or 3 years ago. All of a sudden I was like, what is this? Is this a new term? Is this what the kids are talking about? And I think it's just with the increase of social media out there, that's what leads. And I'm on there a lot. So I get, every time I open up my app, imposter syndrome. But I think really the biggest way to acknowledge that, or to, get over that, is to acknowledge it. Because I think everyone does go through that, and it's something that you're not alone in. Everyone's has or is going through that insecure feeling, because there is always going to be someone, like, you play football in high school. Yeah, there's a whole entire league with professional athletes that are a lot better at football than you are. But, that's really where it starts, I think, coming down to the mind. How do you want to interpret that? You can either you can victim blame yourself and be like, I'm never going to get that good. Or you could be like, yeah, that's inspiration. I'm going to strive to be that way. It's really how you frame it.
You raise a couple of great points in that, obviously there are a lot of different interpretations of what insecurity feels like. And for our listeners, what we're doing right now is we're just trying to take a scientific term, and we're going to use a synonym for it, which in this case is just going to be insecurity. And we're going to use those interchangeably. So if you hear insecurity, we're referring to the imposter phenomena, which is basically just a professional sense of insecurity. So, as we're having this conversation, I would love to know, Steve, with your experience in businesses and in the fitness industry and relationships and the kind of the entrepreneurial world, how do you start to determine, or how do you know when you feel a sense of like, I don't belong, or, something that's related to that professional insecurity?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have felt it. I still feel it regularly. I would say nowadays I feel it less frequently than I used to. And it's probably a byproduct of there's not as much learning going on and there's a little bit more doing. And that's not to say that I don't need to learn more. It's just more to say that I'm not learning as much. I mean, you and I had a brief conversation this morning. I was like, oh man, I need to go back to investing in some learning time. And I like to learn and tinker and try new things. But every time I open the computer and I go down this road of let me day trade, it's like, oh, I hope today is going to be a good day. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it work. But it's because I've not yet mastered that skill. So, with business, man, I opened one, I bought a second one, and that second one I thought was going to be the easiest thing in the world. I don't recall any moment of insecurity there. It was just this high level of confidence of I'll make it happen. And then that second one smashed me in the face. And it was this whole like, oh, I'm not invincible, and things aren't going to just work. The whole idea of build it and they will come doesn't actually exist. And there was always that level of that next step of like, man, is this going to work? But it really just comes down to slowing down for a moment and trying to truly understand where that question is coming from. I think sometimes it's going to come out because you're risking something. I think sometimes it's going to come out because you're doing something you've never done before. I think it's going to come out because you're doing something bigger than you've ever done before. So as you go through that, you need to slow down for a moment. Like, why is this thing a thing? And try to really uncover that, because without knowing where it's bubbling up from, I don't think you're going to know how to necessarily go tackle it or what to do to solve that problem.
No, and I think you bring up a great point in that you almost have to have the experience before you realize that there is something that might be underlying in that particular domain of whatever it is. And I think that, it's kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where when you first get into something, you're super confident and you think you know everything, and it's very reductionistic, and you think that you have a solid handle on it until you start to learn more. And then, it goes into the pits of despair where you realize you don't know much at all. So I think that's definitely a very valuable insight in helping our listeners understand when to pay attention and when that might be surfacing. So Brandon, is there a particular area recently that you feel like that sense of professional insecurity kind of creeping in and rearing its ugly head?
Mm-hmm. Yes, with nutrition, as I've been around and learning now for probably over the last 9, 10 years now, and I can't pass my RD exam, and so I am really at the point where I'm like, I just waste 4 years of learning about all this stuff. But that is the latest. That and muscle ups. I Yeah, that one's kicking my butt. Can't do it. Hurt my lat too, so that's just gonna make it a little harder. But but again, I mean, like, I guess I'll be really transparent. I did not handle it well. I was not in a good spot mentally. I went like on a binger. Like, I had this like tequila bottle that was like halfway filled, and then I drank like the other half of it. But
Mm,
it was you know, the perspective I've had was just like, oh, I've seen everyone else pass like fairly quickly, and
hmm.
I have not. And so I just feel like I'm behind. And it's like, now I'm like learning it's a game. So had to reframe. But yeah, nutrition is
Mm,
something I feel like, yeah, okay, I can't pass this exam, but here we go. We're going again. We're trying
yeah.
again.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, when we talk about, as we transition here a little bit into how we cope with that feeling and those insecurities, and how we can either kind of brush up against them, and whether we lean in or whether we lean back, I guess having your own experience with that series of setbacks, like how did you determine if you wanted to continue to pursue that, or if you wanted to call it, you know?
I started asking around, talking to people like, hey, at what point did you consider, is this something that's not for me? And I didn't have a single person tell me to give up, which I was like, I don't know. I don't need that. I'm kind of, don't tell me good luck, because it's like, it's really, at the end of the day, it's on me. But I did start taking a bigger look around online to just see where other people are at. And so a lot of people have said that they've also failed a handful of times. You only really hear about the success story. So I was really trying to reframe that failure into just another opportunity to keep going. But it was not overnight. And I'm not saying like, oh, yep, you just get over it. You'll get over your insecurities eventually if you put your mind to it. But yeah, had some people kind of support me that were in the industry. I have a thing where I will not talk to anyone that's outside of it, where it's like, oh, well, it's like, you literally have no idea what I'm going through because you haven't been through this. And so I kind of partition my life, but that's a whole other topic. That's
That's a
another.
Yeah.
whole other set of issues to unpack.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my
Say
gosh.
in a therapy session. But
Well, I
yeah,
mean, hey, listen, you want views or not? No, I'm kidding.
but yeah, and so it was just kind of talking to the right people that have kind of been in my shoes before and hearing what their
Hmm.
advice was. And again, none of them ever said to give up, and it's easier too. But at the same time, I feel like I'm in the sunk cost fallacy right now, where if I gave up too, I'm like, well, there goes 5 years worth of education that would technically not be used for anything. So
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really valuable for our listeners to also understand that, while you were in the depths of your figuring it out, like one of the ways that you pulled yourself out of it and decided to lean in was to look at other people in similar situations and to find that support from a sense of community. And I think that's really valuable because in our own heads, we don't really say the nicest things to ourselves a lot of the time. So, I mean, Steve, in terms of your own stuff, like, how did you navigate some of those feelings that eventually came up around, like, not good enough, and the common subtext of what really drives that type of professional insecurity?
It's a good question. When I think through that kind of history, if you will, in the beginning, it was the questions of, am I capable of growing this gym? Am I capable of making this gym successful? Like, those were the questions that happened during number 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. Then it started the transition of like, okay, well, it's not about making the gym successful or the business successful, but rather, can I step up to the plate in this piece of the business that's needed for the business to grow? So one of the biggest things that came on early for me was operationalizing the businesses and removing myself as the system. Then it turned into being a better leader and being able to lead the team, but also lead the business. Then it turned into, can I go and learn marketing in order to actually grow and market the business and do what I need to do there? So I share those kind of examples, but the overarching theme is, it became, at first it was this big thing of, can I make this thing successful? But eventually it chunked down of, can I learn this skill set or this specific thing in business that's needed for the business? Like, can I be good enough at this thing to make it grow? And what happened there, it really pointed me in the right direction of, this is the thing I need to focus on to create the success that I desire, and whatever success looked like in those moments. Right. So, again, I became a better question asker over time. Can I create a successful business? Well, sure. Probably, without sounding cocky, or at the risk of sounding cocky, easy today. But am I good enough in this specific area of business to make the business successful, is the right question, because it also now starts to cause that laser narrowing focus that needed in order to create said success. So just more of asking better questions, focusing on the right piece. Where do I need to grow in order to go there? And sometimes the right answer was, well, I don't need to know this better. I need to find somebody that knows this better, right? Like that's also become a, call it, maturation process throughout this, where 10 years ago, I needed to know and understand every single part of the business. And we all know, like, I like to tinker and learn new things, but I also know nowadays, like, to go and learn and be super proficient as deep as I am in certain areas, it takes years and years to get there. Like, I can't ever replicate or duplicate what either of you two do. I also don't want to. Like, I just know I want to know what I want to know, but I've also learned where I don't want to know. So it's been that process of just like, what is the thing that has to happen? Is it for me to figure out? How deep do I need to go? How far do I have to go to create the result I care about? Those are the things that start to happen throughout time, that I think for people. And the other side of it too, in the most loving way possible. And I want to say, without again sounding like an asshole, I'm different, but if I'm not stressed, I'm not thriving. Like, that is definitely one thing I've learned about myself. So if I don't have something where I'm like, man, I don't know if I can make this work, I'm probably actually just not as happy and driven and motivated to go down this road, because there's no challenge in front of me. It's either that, or I have to overdose on caffeine to keep stress high. So I just feel normal.
Yeah, everybody raise your glasses.
Has
Oh, Steve doesn't have one.
I have water right now. So, but well, Andrew, you've been asking us the questions, but let's talk about your insecurities, if you have any. I don't want to make any assumptions. Have you? Do you? What has progression throughout said journey looked like?
I got nothing. Just rock steady. I have no feelings. Well, before we transition, and I just want to call this out real quick, because it's, as we're telling these stories, there are such great things for listeners to take away. And I think that what you mentioned, as you kind of mentioned the components in the composite type of situation where you broke it down into skills, you took a skills-based approach, whereas in Brandon took more of a community-based approach. And obviously relationships were a thing for you, but there's something very interesting on the back end of this. And this is actually and this will tie into my stuff. There's this mitigating factor, or this thing that can be very protective when it comes to helping people stay on track. And I think that's this idea of interest. The more interested you are, the less the insecurity or inadequacy feelings matter, right? Because you have this passion, or there's this drive to consume and to grow and evolve, because you're always looking for well, how does the next thing tie into this idea? I need to learn more. I need to understand this. And I think that when people say you need to find a professional passion to pursue, I think that's really what they're referencing, and they don't really have the right languaging for it, because it sounds like, well, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Well, I mean, there are people that still work and probably have, a passing fancy for what they do. But I think, again, like that passion is derived from interest. So in the academic community, there's a saying that research is me search, where you're trying to understand yourself. And I think that for me right now, and just so everyone's clear, I'm wildly insecure about so many things, like, between relationships, between professionalism, and there's a reason why when you look at all the high performers, most of them are wildly insecure, which is why they're constantly striving to be better than, whether that's better than themselves, which is the healthy version of that, or better than some kind of comparator or someone that is local inside of their proximity. And there's a great book that's called Wanting, The Power of Mimetic Desire. So if you wanted to go and read that, it'll help you understand why you want what you want. And oftentimes it's not because you actually want it. And that's where I think imposter phenomena comes in, of like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough because I have this comparator. Well, that person's not really, like, maybe they have a genuine interest. And I think that we can all agree that for whatever Alex Hormozy has learned and done, he is very, very prevalent inside of the marketing space. Right. And when we think about that, there is an innate interest that he has that seems to have propelled him from a learning perspective, from a reinvestment perspective, because he's kind of pulling on that thread of interest. And his interest seems like it's around this thing of building $1 billion company, And so when I think about my own journey, and, like when I was younger, I was involved in martial arts. I intended on going into the Olympics, and like I did abysmally with my academic performance in high school. So my Korean mom pulled me out, and like, there's always this theme of having to try to belong, which is a really crucial underpinning of what imposter phenomena brings to the surface. Is I don't belong. I shouldn't charge this. If this isn't right, like I'm going to be discovered, as if there's some kind of subterfuge or hidden agenda that you have that you're thinking that no one else should know about. And that's wildly crazy to think about, but our anxieties don't have to always make sense. And so, and I think that I was able to take that idea of, if I'm better than, I don't have to try to belong. Other people would then want to try to, want to belong in my social circle, so to speak. And I would create my own thing rather than trying to play someone else's game. And that evolved into, going down and serving as a reconnaissance Marine, doing my tour, and then obviously going through school and like, oh, I don't want just a bachelor's degree. I want a master's degree. Well, I don't just want a master's degree. I want to open a gym. I want to have the experience. I want to be better than someone that's just academic. And then, on the other end, like, well, I'm an academic now as a master's. Like, how do I win that game? Well, I have to get a doctorate, which is the weirdest, dumbest thing I think my ego's ever talked me into, because it's funny when people ask me, Andrew, what do you want to do with your doctorate? And I don't really have a great answer for them these days, because it was truly a pursuit born of hubris and like just a misplaced desire to be at the top of the metaphorical food chain. And I will say that there are doors that open when you have a doctorate. But I say that as we're transitioning into 2024 and beyond, when, AI is a thing, like no one really gives a fuck if you have a doctorate at this point, I don't think. Right? Maybe the people that are Gen Xers and maybe like the elder millennials and people that have an appreciation for the analog style of life. But everyone that's a Gen Z, like they don't give a fuck if you're a psychologist or whatever. It's the value that you can bring to the table. And I think that bringing all this full circle for me, wildly insecure all the time, the thing that allows me to navigate my insecurities is to have a bigger passion, or a bigger purpose, I should say, that fuels my passion. And that is, the coaching industry is wildly underserved. And there are a lot of people that are putting out fucked up information that aren't quality sources of information, if I'm just going to be blunt about it. There are people that are creating these marketing types of, business coaching paradigms that don't serve the community, that leave these potentially vulnerable populations, because they're new coaches. They don't understand that there are inherent risks. All those people see when they consume these courses is, well, this person said that I would be able to hit 10K. I didn't do that. It must be me. And it really then creates this pervasive thing where you have a lot of these insecure coaches, rather than people that might have actually started this journey because they truly loved it and they wanted to be impactful and they wanted to be beneficial to their local communities and to their online communities, and they wanted to make a penny along the way. So there's a sense of conviction that comes from that, of like, taking the insecurity, taking the imposter phenomenon, the not good enough, the not belonging, and now turning that around and trying to make this something that, is the thing that people feel like they don't have to have those. And really just, that's why the team development, the mentoring stuff that I like doing, I prefer working with new coaches a lot of the times, because I feel like there's an ethical sense of responsibility to protect those people from those things. So that's the long answer of, do I deal with this? Yes. How prevalent is it? It's usually off the charts, but the thing that helps me stay ahead of that is I don't want anyone to have to deal with the same things, in the same sense of like a lack of fulfillment, whether it's from belonging, whether it's from inadequacy or competency. If you know your shit, you will still feel insecure. And that's my disclaimer. But it just won't bother you as much because you won't feel like you have to know your shit. There's just this thing that happens as you just grow up. You get more mature and you're like, I really don't have the answer. And that's actually one of the hallmarks of a lot of the people in the industry that you should probably go follow and respect. The more they say, I don't know, and they ask you follow-up questions, the more reliable and trustworthy of a resource I would say that they probably are. So now that my diatribe's done, I would love to know, because we've talked about so far, like, what is professional insecurity? How do we understand and how do we assess when that's coming up? And, you guys have briefly mentioned how you then inoculate yourself or protect yourself kind of from getting stopped, because we know that consistency and execution are the two things that are most valuable in any kind of progress. So how do you guys, protect yourselves and continue to move forward as it relates to your professional insecurities? Brandon, we know tequila is your thing. Muscle ups, apparently, but like, tongue in cheek aside, like, seriously, how do you mentally stay engaged, and what keeps you going, and how do you cultivate that for yourself?
I think this is what I've been doing lately is, what's it called? I kind of think up of the future, where it's like, okay, am I going to regret giving up more than finishing it? And that's when I kind of create like these scenarios. So like what if scenarios. So it's more, what would my future self think of my decision that I make right now? And I really think that's what pushes it. And I mean, even with that being said, there's been times too where it's like, I really don't think this is worth it anymore. I'm gonna give this up. I'll talk about, I guess powerlifting might have been the last time I did that, where it was fun. I really enjoyed it. Community was great. I just I kept getting hurt, major injuries too. I should say, like messed up my ankle, L4, L5, disc injury, herniation, and so that was where I was like, I really like this, and I feel like if I really put my mind to it, I could potentially set a record in the bench press for my weight class. But just going through that twice and understanding how that felt physically and mentally, I was like, I don't think the pros and cons really outweigh my future self might be like, oh, it's cool that this happened, but there would be a lot of sacrifice. And so that's a situation where I don't know, I was insecure, but there was a little bit more of some, I got to take care of myself in the future, where that kind of breaking it down, what would my future self think? And, I think it's probably better for the best cardiovascularly too. I feel like resting heart rate's below 40, baby, when I'm asleep. So doing something right. Yeah. So that, I don't know if there's an actual term for that, but
Future casting.
I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Is it future casting? Yeah. So future casting has been probably the most effective way for me to manage that insecurity and just to get by it.
Yeah. Really seeing yourself in your future shoes. I love that. Steve, how about you? How do you, outside of conceptualizing and skills and, learning everything you can?
For me, it almost comes down to, I've learned to embrace the idea of having imposter syndrome to an extent as a byproduct of continuing to push myself further. Factually speaking, when you're doing something you've never done, you should feel a little, insecure about your ability to produce a result. I opened my first business more than 20 years ago, and as the 17, 16-year-old, whenever it was, mowing lawns, I have no idea if I did a better job doing landscaping than other people. But I just went out and did my thing and grew as a high schooler, I had 35 accounts of mowing lawns, me and a buddy. And I don't know if we were better or not, but we just went and did it. And at the time it was, this is just a thing to go do, right? Like failure didn't mean losing stuff because I was clearly in high school. I was living at home. It wasn't about making money to support myself, family, or dreams or anything like that. It was just rather like, yeah, here's a good way to go get money, to go have money, type mentality. Obviously there's more on the line now in life or as I transition through, but for me, it's if I don't have any of that kind of insecurity about what I'm doing, I'm probably not pushing myself hard enough. And vice versa. I think that there's a fair, like, oh wow, there's too much insecurity. Like maybe I have way too many things going on right now, and I need to pick the few that matter and let go of some of the other ones. I think like Brandon said that he really thinks about what the future looks like. I do believe I do that, but I think for me, it's like, hey, if I'm going to introduce this thing into my life, I'm going to see it through because future Steve would be happy with this thing. So if I made that decision to introduce it, I want to see it through, but just knowing like, all right, maybe I need to pause right now or whatever, because there's 40 things I'm insecure about versus a probably healthy, like 3 things, type mentality. So for me, I want to have some level in my life because that has now turned into a barometer of I'm pushing and growing to the extent that I want to.
Yeah. And I think that's, keeping the main thing is such a great way to continue to make that meaningful effort and progress. It's interesting because as I'm sitting back and I'm listening to you guys and how you deal with it, there's this element of, it's almost like anxiety is protective from the perspective of like, it will keep you alive and it'll keep you focused. And, I think as we're brushing up against time, one of the things that I think is really important is that, to keep in mind is that trees grow roots because they don't move. And if you don't like where you are, you have to take action. You have to move the needle forward. And you're going to feel anxiety when you're doing something that's unfamiliar because it's unfamiliar. It's like, what do I do? There's not a concrete plan. Like, well, what happens if this happens? What happens? And the more people think and get caught up in that milieu of, I don't know what to do. I don't know is one of the worst things that you could sit in. So if you don't know, then you should go find out. And the only way to find out is to lean into the anxiety. And I'm crafting a TED Talk right now that is literally about leaning in. And there's a semblance of, there's the idea of kinetic energy and potential energy, if we want to look at physics for a second. And, if you have a rock,
I'm sure
like
all of our
boulder,
listeners really love physics, Andrew.
Oh, dude, they love physics. It's so fascinating because there's the most potential that an object has is when it's at rest. And it's no different than business. Everyone has these visions and they have these things that they want to bring to life, but it takes energy to get it moving and to keep it moving. And that's going to mean that as it translates to business, to coaching, to relationships, there has to be some semblance of effort. Effort will gain you experience, and experience will gain you perspective. So people want the perspective, they want to know what to do, but they don't have the experience because they never put the effort in. And so I say all that to say is like, if you feel anxious, you should do the thing. That is an indication that you are leaning into your borders, and borders are where you gain expansion. So be interested, lean in. Those are probably the things that I would like people to walk away with from today. I mean, gents, what would you guys like to have people walk away with as we wrap up here?
If you're not feeling some insecurity around what you have going on, you're probably not growing at the pace that you should be, which should give you a different type of insecurity or stress or some negative feelings. So choose your negative, one you're in control of and is giving you is the predictor of growth, or one you're not in control of and is the predictor of death in the figurative sense. Maybe not the figurative sense, but you get what I mean.
You're in the car either way, passenger, driver. I love that. Brandon, how about you, buddy?
I think it's okay to not have the answer to everything, and it's and that's going to be the reality of things. I can't do anything when it comes to contracting or construction and stuff like that. Can't do it. Won't do it. Don't know how to do it, and that's okay. I'm not going to be insecure about it. I have a buddy that's really good at it. Not insecure because it's just we're not always going to have the answers, and I think that's great because on top of that, then too, you are then forced to rely on people. And I did take this more of a community aspect where if maybe sometimes when you are stuck, it's just a way to reach out and, get that answer from whatever community you're in. Because when we get into our head, we're by ourselves, but we have communication, we are in company. And I think that's
what important.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today here at Beyond the Pump and being party to the imposter phenomenon. There's some great conversations that happen. In the meantime, as we wrap up, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. The more you guys are helping us push this stuff out, the more we can spend time and really focus on bringing you guys the great content and exploring these concepts that are wildly valuable in everything that we're doing. So anything closing remarks wise?
Nope. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic day. See you on the next episode.
All right. Until next time.